Please welcome Jonah Berger. Jonah, nice to see you.
We all have a similar goal, right? How can we get more word of mouth and more activation for the work we're doing in the area? It's tough, right? People have divided attention, lots of things going on, huge number of things to pay attention to. It's hard to get them to pay attention to us. How do we make that happen? Well, I want to start today with a very simple question. Here are 3 products or brands that everyone here is probably quite familiar with. We have Disney World, the self-described place where dreams come true. We have Honey Nut Cheerios, the delicious breakfast cereal. And we have Scrubbing Bubbles, which is a bathroom cleaner. If you had to guess, which of these 3 do you think get the most word of mouth? Is it Disney, is it Cheerios, or is it Scrubbing Bubbles? What do you think? Heard some Disney. For how many people for Disney? I'm going to ask everybody to vote. Okay, about 15%. Somebody else? Scrubbing Bubbles. How many for Bubbles? Okay, most of the rest of the room looks like 60% or so. And anybody for Cheerios? Okay, a handful of people. Looks like many of you guys didn't vote. And unless you work with Disney or you work with Cheerios or you work with Scrubbing Bubbles, the specific answer doesn't matter a lot, right? Because you're not trying to get word of mouth for that thing. But if you don't understand why, it's going to be really hard to get people to talk about the stuff you're doing, right? How can we get word of mouth for the initiatives we're building? And that brings me to the second point. So I think Bubbles was the highest votes. How many people guessed Bubbles? Excellent guess. Unfortunately, it's wrong. I think Disney was next. How many for Disney? That makes more sense, right? Nope, wrong also. The answer is Cheerios, the thing that the fewest of us guessed. And so what I think that points out is sometimes our intuition about these things might be wrong. And so if we're thinking about how do we make out-of-home advertising more effective in driving consumer behavior, we have to understand word of mouth. Word of mouth is a powerful tool. It's much cheaper than traditional advertising. But to get it to work and blend it with our advertising initiatives, we got to understand why people talk in the first place. The key here is understanding that science and applying that science to make it work for us. So if you had to guess, what % of all word of mouth do you think is online? So of all consumer-to-consumer conversations, what % of word of mouth about products and brands is on things like Facebook and Twitter and blogs and reviews and the like? The answer is 7. 7% of all word of mouth is online. There's a lot of hype and excitement around online. And that's not to say that online is not a useful tool to spread word of mouth. But it's one tool in a much bigger toolkit. And the other thing is, unless we understand how to use that tool, we're not going to be very effective. Because there are companies and organizations that spend thousands, if not millions of dollars online and do it effectively, and others that do it ineffectively. Same with billboards, right? We've seen lots of billboards that do a great job and others that do a terrible job. To understand how to make word of mouth work for us, we've got to understand why people talk and share. Right? 6 key factors that drive people to talk and share. We got social currency, which I'll talk about briefly. We've got triggers. We've got emotion, public, practical value, and if there's time, I'll talk about stories briefly. Each of these is a principle that, if applied, can generate more word of mouth for what we're trying to do. Right? Because that's the real benefit. Word of mouth is much more trusted than traditional advertising. We see an ad, we don't always believe what that ad is telling us. We hear it from a friend, we're much more likely to believe it. But ads can activate word of mouth if they're done effectively, right? If we design ads effectively, people will talk about them and be more likely to spread our messages. But to do that effectively, we've got to understand how they work. So let me tell you a story to start about a hot dog restaurant in New York. So anybody from New York here for the day? Yeah, okay. So for the rest of you, imagine you're visiting New York one weekend. You're walking around the Lower East Side and your stomach is rumbling. You're hungry, it's time to grab something to eat. When you notice a big hot dog-shaped sign out in front of a restaurant with the words "Eat Me" written in on it in what looked like mustard. You say, I haven't had a hot dog in a while, why not? I'll check this place out. So you walk down a flight of stairs, just like these, into a restaurant called Criff Dogs. Now, if you like hot dogs, you will be in heaven. Criff Dogs has every hot dog you can imagine, from a good morning hot dog with bacon, eggs, and cheese, rough on the stomach, but interesting nonetheless, a hot dog with green onion and pineapple, and a traditional New York-style water dog with just ketchup and mustard. So you're sitting there, you're munching on your hot dog, when you notice something unusual in the corner of the screen. Almost looks like a phone booth, like one of those things that Clark Kent might jump into to change into Superman. So just for fun, you have a minute, slide open the door, and walk inside. Pretty tight in there. It's a phone booth after all. But on the wall, you'll see something you haven't seen in even longer, a rotary dial phone. One of those things you have to stick your finger into and go around in a circle. Just for fun, put your finger and say the number 3, go around in a circle, and hold the phone up to your ear. It'll go ring, ring, and somebody will pick up the other line, and they'll ask you whether you have a reservation. Reservation? I'm at a phone booth inside of a hot dog restaurant. What could I possibly have a reservation for? But if you're lucky, and they happen to have space, or you happen to make a reservation, the back of that phone booth will open, and you'll be led into a secret bar called Please Don't Tell. Now, Please Don't Tell has violated a number of traditional laws of marketing, right? No sign on the street, no sign inside the restaurant. They've done everything they can to make themselves difficult to find. Yet they've never advertised, and every day they're full. 3 p.m., phone lines open up. By 3:30, all the seats are gone. So what did they do right? How did they get so many people? Well, they made themselves a secret. And let me tell you a little secret about secrets. Think about the last time someone told you something, and they told you not to tell anybody else. What's the first thing you then did with that information? Told somebody, right? Because having access to information that not everyone else has makes you look good. It makes you look smart and in the know. It gives you what I'll call social currency. Just like the car we drive and the clothes we wear, the things we say and the things we share affect how other people see us. So one way to get people talking about our ideas and spreading our initiatives and our ads is to get them to look good. Because the better we can make them look, the more likely they're going to spread the message. People want to show they're a good parent, share a lot of things that show that they are a good parent. They take care of their kids, they're a good cook, all the things around the house. People that want to show they're into technology share a lot of things about that. Many of you probably shared some ads that Tim showed to show you know what's going on in the industry, because it's a reflection of who you are. How can we make people look good to make them talk about our stuff? In the book, I talk about 4 ways. Here I'll talk about 2. The first is to make them feel like insiders. Right? Please Don't Tell did a great job of that. Hidden bar inside a hot dog restaurant, you look really cool for knowing about a place like that. So you're much more likely to talk about it. Right? And it's not just them. McDonald's did a great job of this a few years ago. So about a decade ago, McDonald's ran out of chicken. Essentially, Chicken McNuggets were so popular that they couldn't keep them in stock. They had to come up with something new to put on the menu to drive some of the demand away from the nuggets. So they came up with a new thing called the McRib. Now, the McRib is a little bit of a misnomer in that there's not much rib meat on the McRib sandwich. It's more partially separated pig pieces and stomach meat, but there's enough barbecue sauce on top that nobody really notices the difference. So a sandwich comes out, and it does okay. It doesn't do great, so McDonald's does something interesting. They take it off the market. And then they release it in certain cities at certain times a year. So sometimes Denver, sometimes DC, sometimes Detroit, but never all the cities and never all at once. And suddenly, people go nuts for the McRib. People will tweet, "Oh my God, the McRib is in town. We have to go." Somebody put up a website called the McRib Locator, which is a map of the US with pinpricks on it for a sighting of a sandwich at McDonald's. Not a USO, not a Loch Ness Monster, a sandwich at McDonald's. Why did people talk about it? Because it made them look good, smart, and in the know. Right? Beyonce came out with an album last year, no advertising, no PR. She put it online, but she knew that if people saw it, they would say, "Wow, I want to tell everyone else in my network," and look cool along the way to spread that message. Right? The more you make people look like insiders, feel special, right? They've seen something they've never seen before, the more likely they're going to share it. The second way is to find the inner remarkability. And I think this is quite important. Let me show you a great oldie but goodie example of finding the inner remarkability. You might say, well, okay, what won't people talk about? I don't know, a dishwasher or maybe a blender. Let me show you how a company got over 200 million views for videos about blenders.
Will it blend? That is the question. I love my new iPhone. It does everything. But will it blend? That is the question. Let's find out. I think I'm going to push the smoothie button. I smoke. Don't breathe this. Now, you fans on YouTube have asked me to blend an iPhone, so I did it. But I have another. I'm going to put this on eBay.
So this video has 10 million views. The set has over 200 million. After they come out, Blender sales go up over 700%. That's pretty remarkable. But I think the most remarkable part about this is they did this for one of the least exciting products ever, a blender. Right? Many of you are going to go home when you come back from this conference and you're going to look at the blender on the counter in your kitchen and go, can you do that, little blender? Right? Most people never think or talk about their blenders, but they got people talking about blenders because they found the inner remarkability. So that's social currency. Next, I want to talk about triggers. And to do that, I want to use an ad that got a lot of attention last year, a Geico ad for Hump Day. Great ad for Geico. If you look at this ad, though, it's okay. Right? It's not the most remarkable ad ever. It's a pretty good ad, but not the most remarkable ever. Yet it's one of the most shared ads of last year. And so one question, again, is why? Why are so many people sharing this ad? Well, I'm a data guy, so I dug a little deeper and worked with a company called Unruly. This is the shares of that ad over time. And you notice an interesting pattern. It's flat, and then there's a spike, and it goes down. Then flat again, and then another spike, then it goes down, then flat, then spike, then down. Interesting. If you look closer, those spikes aren't random. They're every 7 days. And if you look even closer, you'll notice that they're every Wednesday, or as it's colloquially known, Hump Day. In fact, if you look at the search traffic before this ad came out, Progressive was beating Geico in search traffic. But now, every once in a while, there's a spike for Geico every Wednesday. Because Wednesday comes around, it reminds people of the ad, it reminds them to go check it out, they share it, and it reminds them of Geico in the first place. It's not just about how much people like something, it's about whether they're thinking about it or not. Because this ad is equally good or bad every day of the week. It's good or bad on Monday, good or bad on Tuesday, equally good or bad on Wednesday, but Wednesday provides a ready reminder, what psychologists would call a trigger, to make people think about and talk about and share the content. Because if something is top of mind, it's going to be tip of tongue. And I think this is one of the big benefits of out-of-home advertising, right? You can remind people about something right before the point of purchase. There's a really nice study that shows when they play French music in the grocery store, people are more likely to buy French wine. And when they play German music in the grocery store, people are more likely to buy German wine. Because it triggered them or reminded them about the product right before they were about to purchase it. So this brings me to the Cheerios word of mouth, the amount of time people are talking about Cheerios by time of day. What do you notice about when people are talking about Cheerios? In the morning, right? Why is it shifted to the right on the weekend? Wake up later. This is not rocket science. When people are using a product, they're much more likely to think about it. Right? Geico could come up with an ad, instead of an ad about Leap Day, they could come up with an ad, about Hump Day, they could come up with an ad about Leap Day. Okay, might be all right, but people would only think about it once every few years. An ad about Hump Day, they'll think about once a week. That slogan, weekends are made for Michelob, was originally holidays are made for Michelob. But they moved it to the weekend because the weekend's more frequent. Often we think about using discounts to drive behavior. So if we're trying to sell more of our ad space, for example, we'll say, okay, we'll discount it a little bit, and that'll drive behavior. Well, often we think, okay, we'll have something that's $20, let's say, we'll discount it, $5 off, or we could discount it what in percentage terms? 25%, right? Everyone agree that those are economically the same? Are they the same to the end user? No. People are much more likely to activate or take that deal or want to take action if it's 25% off. But it's not just that percentages are always better. Actually, if you have a bigger number, like a 2,000 number, you could take $500 off, or you could take 25% off there. The 500 is much more likely to drive people to action. Something I call the rule of 100. I talked about it a bunch in the practical value chapter, all about how we frame numerical information, whatever it might be, to drive people to take certain behaviors. I want to wrap up by talking about stories, because stories are the currency of conversation. And I want to talk about a particular type of story. So imagine you're at a party, and someone walks up to you and they say something like, hey, did you know that Subway has 5 subs under 5 grams of fat? No one wants to be a walking advertisement, right? No one wants to be going around spewing out product information, but they're happy to tell stories. People love telling stories. In this case, people are happy to tell the Jared story. Jared was a guy that was way overweight, picked his courses in college based on which ones had big seats rather than which ones were actually useful for his education. His roommate at the time said, Jared, you're morbidly obese. You got to do something about it. So he goes on a Subway diet. Subway for lunch, Subway for dinner, every day for months on end. 6-inch for lunch, foot-long for dinner. Eventually loses over 180 pounds. He eats the cold-cut trio, the veggie sub, the tuna sub, loses all this weight, goes from pants that are that big to something much more reasonable. Notice what you learned about the Subway brand while I was saying what just seemed like an idle story. Right? Idle chatter, what consumers do to each other every day. But notice what you learned about the brand. Well, you learned that they have healthy options, right? Because I said they have a number of healthy options. In fact, so many that you could eat there for months on end. You learned about the 6-inch, the foot-long, the veggie sub, the cold-cut sub. In fact, everything that's on that side of the screen is actually hidden inside that story. It's not just a story or a narrative. It's a vessel or carrier of information. I'll just give you 2 key next steps. First, what's your message? What is the thing or things that you want people to talk about and share? You don't just want more word of mouth, that you do, but you want them to share something in particular. You want them to talk about an ad, you want them to talk about how great the execution was. Think about what that thing was, and then use the 6 key steps around them. You don't need to do all 6 at once, but pull them off one at a time. Right? Picking off one of these at a time will help us design campaigns that are not just more effective from how much people like the ad, but how much they're going to drive people to talk about them. Because the talking is free. Right? We don't have to pay people to talk about the ad. If they like it and it's interesting and it's engaging, they'll talk and share with others. But to do that, we have to understand why people talk and share in the first place. And in case it's helpful, there's a free workbook up on my website just under the Resources tab. It'll walk you through some questions to think about how to apply these ideas. Because again, it's not random, it's not luck, and it's not chance. There's a science behind why people talk and share. If we understand that science, we can build ads and engaging experiences that people are much more likely to talk about, and we can help our own products and ideas catch on. Thank you very much.